All right. Well, as people look like they are jumping in this morning, wonderful. Welcome. I hope everybody's having a wonderful day. We're going to go ahead and get started right on time since we do have a short time together today. So in the chat, you will notice, and I'll keep popping it in for anyone that joins us along the way. You're going to find a link that's going to lead you to the slide deck today so that you can follow along if you would like. So thank you so much for joining us today. We are focusing on strengthening schools through educator well-being. I'd like to first introduce myself. My name is Lindsay Keenan, and I am the Director of Social and Emotional Learning Innovation with Greenfield Learning. I'm a former marriage and family therapist and a former elementary classroom teacher, and I absolutely love being able to combine those two worlds to be able to support not only our educators and our students with that social and emotional learning. I would also love to introduce two wonderful people who are joining us today who are going to give you some wonderful information. First off, we have Michael Fauteur. He is the Executive Director of GiveThx. He's a 20-year educator, former master mathematics teacher, academic dean, and district director of innovation. So welcome, Mike. Thank you for joining us today. And I'd also like to introduce Sandy Clifton. She is an adjunct professor at Concordia University and a former assistant superintendent for K-12 education services in Redondo Beach Unified School District, and is also a former special education teacher and principal. So welcome, Sandy. Thank you so much for joining us today. So our goals for today. And we're so happy that you are joining us. By the end of our quick webinar today, you're going to be able to recall different challenges that we are facing with educator well-being at this time. Understanding the scientifically backed benefits and practices of gratitude, and also considering how to apply these gratitude practices that we're going to talk about today in your own context to strengthen your educator's well-being. So at this time, I would love to turn it over to Mike and hear what he has to say about gratitude.
Thanks so much, Lindsay. Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely, thank you.
Excellent. Welcome, everybody. I'm going to start with the educator well-being challenges. I'm sure all of us have experienced this to different degrees. I'm excited to unpack it a little bit and talk about how gratitude can help address it. So what we're seeing on the Greenfield side and the GiveThx side and from Sandy's side, we're seeing emotional stress, not just directly onto educators. And I say educators and staff, I don't just say teachers because it's not only teachers, it's all educators and adults in the learning community. They're experiencing stress themselves directly, but also vicariously as they see their students are stressed and in some cases traumatized. And that goes pre-pandemic, but also now this is exacerbated in the pandemic. A big source of stress for teachers. They're overburdened, they're exhausted, and a lot of times they feel inadequate when they're not given enough support for something they're asked to do. And so those effects, you can see the sources on the right. Seeing student well-being and performance will stress out teachers significantly. Not enough time, too much work, and our relationships with students and adults can sometimes be stressful. And that insufficient PD is an ongoing challenge for any learning community. And so that's what we're seeing. And then when we zoom out a little bit, part of what we wanted to do today was to put our finger on some current research just to bring to your attention to help further frame the challenge. The RAND Corporation did a study, and pre-pandemic, 1 in 6 teachers felt likely to leave the field, to leave the profession. But now during the pandemic, and hopefully as we're emerging from it, it's now 1 in 4. That's really daunting. We're talking about a potential tsunami of educators looking to leave the profession. And there's an equity dimension to this that both RAND and NPR put their finger on, and that Black teachers or Black and Hispanic teachers are more likely to leave compared to the overall teacher population. And so the RAND Corporation also noted that there's more stress and depression compared to adults in the general working population. There's more stress and depression in the teaching and the education field, and that remote teaching did not help. that put a huge amount of stress on people, and people's own individual health concerns compounded that. And when you look at NPR, they cited a poll done by the National Educator Association, the NEA, who reported over half of educators thought they were going to leave sooner than they planned. And burnout, feeling exhausted is a #1 problem. And again, there's that equity dimension where it's not just teachers in general, but it's more acute for teachers who identify as Black and Hispanic. So this is a very real problem, and we're seeing it ourselves, but it's also being shown from whether it's RAND or NPR or other sources to be a paramount concern. And so what are we going to do about it? There's no one silver bullet. I'm sure no one expected that. But what we're excited to talk to you about today, and this is something that came from schools to help directly address this challenge, is that gratitude science can play a role, and a surprisingly very low lift, high impact role to help mitigate the effects of the educator well-being challenge. So gratitude, very briefly, what is it? It's a feeling of thanks and appreciation for the good things in the world and the benefits we receive from them. And I like to break it into 2 parts. You can be grateful for things like your health, there's enough to eat, maybe that math test is done. But you can also be thankful to people for the things they do for us directly, or perhaps indirectly for things they do for our community. And gratitude science is robust. It's a remarkably deep research base for the effects on individuals and communities. I want to focus on the bolded ones. Yes, there's belonging increases in happiness and self-esteem, but strengthening relationships and reducing stress and anxiety and building resilience, rewiring the brain, much like for growth mindset, but in this case for resilience. Yes, these things are hard, and I can notice and be grateful for these things over here too, are incredibly important as why gratitude can be effective in helping to mitigate the educator well-being challenge. And the theory of change around gratitude is very straightforward. When you thank somebody, you value them. So you reinforce your relationship with them, and both of you feel happier and less stressed. When you thank someone, though, you also reinforce the thing you're thanking them for. So when it comes to students, it's particularly effective because they need a lot of practice recognizing pro-social behaviors, thanking others, and then getting feedback when they demonstrate those pro-social behaviors when they're thanked. But it's particularly important for the adults too. When we want to create a positive and supportive and healthy learning community, we want to make sure we're very clear on the behaviors that we think underpin our professional culture, and we want to recognize and reinforce them to better develop them as a community alongside our well-being and connection. And you might say, okay, gratitude can improve connection and overall well-being, emotional health. It can also reinforce the things you're thanking people for. I get it. But does this really affect adults? And the answer is yes. So the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence did 2 qualitative studies, one in the state of Connecticut and one in Rhode Island, particularly looking during the pandemic with the acute stress that it's created, to see a little bit more about the sources of stress for the educators, and also what, if any, positive effective experiences they had. What could they hang their hat on or look to as a source of joy, stress, de-stress, right? Something to help them feel good, to help them navigate the well-being challenge. And so both states cited feeling overwhelmed, stressed, anxious. The sources they felt they didn't have enough time or training, which predates the pandemic for many reasons. COVID certainly stressed them out, but the demands of the job and sometimes leadership and communication, those were sources of feeling overwhelmed, stressed, frustrated, and anxious. There was a lot of alignment there. And these blue links you can click on and go deeper to read all of these sources, and we encourage you to do so later. What was really interesting, and I want you to take away, is this. When they asked them what helps them manage and navigate these stresses, gratitude was in the top of both states from what they were reporting. While there were other things like compassion and feeling a sense of belonging, feeling grateful was highly effective for them to help mitigate and navigate these challenges. And when they said, okay, but tell us more about gratitude. Was it personal gratitude, feeling grateful for your health or things like that? Yes, but they actually said the sources were more student and colleague positive interactions. So feeling grateful for how they're connecting with the students and their colleagues. So not only is gratitude effective for well-being and reinforcing pro-social skills, but also for adults, it really did help them navigate one of the most acute experiences of stress that have happened in education now in 100 years. And the Greater Good Science Center, based out of UC Berkeley, goes a little deeper. They have a robust research page that says teachers in particular derive a greater sense of satisfaction and accomplishment when gratitude is used to help them feel recognized and appreciated. It also directly reduces exhaustion and burnout, which we saw is a chief concern right now among folks. It goes more broadly beyond teaching that job satisfaction will increase with gratitude for all workers. And as we talked about before, both emotional and physical well-being will improve. Your happiness, your satisfaction and positivity, and then also decreases in anxiety and depression. It also improves relationships and friendships, because I go back to that original idea. If I thank you, I'm valuing you, and you want to be friends with me. You want to be a supportive and positive colleague if I'm taking the time to recognize and appreciate you. It's really that simple. And so when I used to fly on planes more, I always remember that little symbol where it says, put your oxygen mask on first before helping the child next to you. And I like to think about that when it comes to educators. We're no good to our students if we can't take care of our own well-being first. And a lot of times educators are just expected to figure it out and to put their own needs aside. But first off, educator well-being matters, full stop. Secondly, to do the best work with students, they need to have their own well-being and their capacity to do the work addressed. So educator wellness and their own capacity need to be explicitly addressed, is what we found. And they need to have sustainable routines to do this, not one and done PD. And they also need to have a particular focus on relationships with students and their peers. And so GiveThx is a research validated program that does strengthen student and staff well-being and social emotional skills through gratitude practice. It has evidence for both ESSA to qualify it for the ESSA tiers of evidence, and also in CASEL's program guide. And this came out of schools, which I'll talk about in just a moment. And we're excited to talk about this program and the practices, which you'll see and take away in just a moment, as a way to build on the research you just saw and how gratitude can play a role in addressing educator well-being. And so GiveThx has three components. There's a set of practices, which are modular, tiny, clean little easy things to integrate into what you're already doing to enhance the good work you're already committed to. There's lightweight software to help make it coherent, safe, and accessible, and really engaging to connect people. And there's some very straightforward core training to help people get up and running quickly. And where did it come from? It actually came out of my math classroom in Oakland, California. My kids came into my 9th grade math classroom on average with 5th grade math skills, and they had a lot of armor on. They didn't feel like they belonged. They had a lot of stress and anxiety. And I needed to figure out a way to help them slowly take that armor off so they could accelerate their learning. It was highly successful. For 5 years running across the whole network of schools, students learned 3 years in 1. What was interesting though, it also created a more safe and equitable way for people to connect. We've all seen it, right? The same 3 lovely people, whether students or adults at a staff meeting, put their hands up when asked if they want to thank someone or appreciate someone publicly. We wanted to create a way for everyone to participate and to navigate social identities, whether it was race, class, gender, or popularity, so they all could feel like they could participate. But part of our theory of change was that we needed to start with the educators, that the educators building their capacity and well-being was paramount. And so what's unique about the program is it's not just something that happens to kids. Kids lead the work, but all the adults, not just the teachers, office manager, principal, bus driver, lunch room person, they all get to participate to help create a safe, supportive learning community. And so how it works is really simple, and there's an elegance in the simplicity. Students and staff will send thank you notes recognizing each other for something that they're benefiting from. So I might thank Lindsay for working really hard to help me co-plan this presentation. I was a little bit stressed and I feel better now. So I'm going to say, Lindsay, thank you so much for co-planning. I feel better now because I was stressed. And I might pick help as the tag. She sees that and she goes, oh, Mike appreciates me. Great. And I am a helper. And so she's able to reflect on her impact and realize that she has a positive influence on her learning community. This, of course, is a big deal for students too. Teachers are able to monitor this, see evidence, and coach folks to help build a robust community of practice. And this is an example, this is a note from one teacher to another. Thank you so much for all your support and guidance. Truly appreciate all the help you've given me this year. You've truly been a blessing to me during my first year of teaching, and I'm sure we've all remembered our first year in the classroom or whatnot. It's somewhere back there. And this person tagged it helpfulness, and the school decides the tags. I'll talk about that in a moment. But building community, particularly among the adults, is a really, really big deal. And so imagine if you had every thank you note as a practitioner in one place, sorted by reason. Imagine your school got together at the beginning and you all decided as a learning community, here are the 10 competencies or character virtues, however we want to talk about these, that matter to our learning community, both our students and professionally for our staff. And every thank you note we get will be tagged so we can sort them by reason and we can see how we're having an impact on others. What could you learn as an individual? What could you learn if you saw this across the school level? If you're a counselor, if you're a principal, if you're a district leader, how could you fill in the blanks between those months apart surveys where you're going, oh, wow, I just wish I knew what was going on in real time? Well, one of the problems we wanted to solve was both staff and student connection. We didn't want to wait till the end of the year to realize some people felt disconnected. We wanted to know how people felt with respect to belonging, how engaged they were or not, and what social emotional skills or competencies were most important to us. And this is data from a K-8 school in Oakland from the pandemic. And it was really, really meaningful to them. Joy was a very big deal for them. And so seeing this data as a leader, a counselor, particularly an administrator, across the school was very eye-opening and complementary to existing work and a beautiful way to make culture visible. And so you might say, okay, great. How can I do this practically in my own school with my own role? And we're going to briefly touch on this, and then we're going to pivot to talking to Sandy and Lindsay a bit about what they're seeing and how this can practically play out based on their views and experiences. And so you have access to all of this. The bit.ly again is in the lower right. The GiveThx practices, you're welcome to click and explore, and it's quite the rabbit hole of fun resources. There's one-page facilitator guides, there's one-click slide decks for you to be off and running, and you could use these this afternoon in your staff meeting if you wish. But we broke it apart into the personal and interpersonal. So the personal, the reflections on the right, are practices. These are non-linear, you can use them in any order, and they just take minutes. And then there's the personal on the left, which interpersonal, which is to support in between colleagues. And these are really easy ways to complement what you're already doing. Did you just have a department meeting and you want to do a process check that's not awkward? Do the group gratitude where everybody thanks each person so everybody gets recognized for something to make the work go well, for example. So I encourage you to look at these and take these practices like we promised and be able to apply them right away in some of your work. There are additional lessons that you're able to use, but this right here, these practices are the core of using gratitude, the pedagogy, to help support educator well-being. And you might say, okay, great, Mike, but where does it fit? So I mentioned department meetings, but there's staff meetings where people love using the new gratitude practice. You can see how many times you personally have thanked each of your colleagues. So that means you can make a different decision. Maybe I haven't thanked Sandy yet this year, or maybe quite as much. So I can then say, okay, what am I directly or indirectly grateful to Sandy for? And I can make a decision to better include her and expand my connection to my colleagues. So it could be a staff meeting shout out, it could be a well-being check-in and doing a reflection, or a process check like I spoke to earlier. I encourage people to click on these, including the additional routines link on the left, to see other routines to plug gratitude into, not on top of, to enhance what you're already doing, to integrate it into what you're doing. And so in the last 10 minutes we have here, we want to talk about applying this in your own practice. And we're going to talk a little bit about our own Sandy and Lindsay and myself. And so here are a couple of questions, which I'm going to, in just a moment, kick the first one off. I'll throw it towards Sandy. About what we're seeing. We talked a little bit about research. We talked a little about gratitude as a mechanism here. But I want to kind of go back to the beginning to continue to really frame this challenge. And so, Sandy, I'd like to start just from your experience as an assistant superintendent and what you're seeing now as a professor and in your work. You know, what are you seeing about this challenge with well-being from that view? You know, how big of a challenge is this? And to your mind, what are some of the causes? Do they line up with some of the things that we've already shared today?
Yes, from a district level, over the years, and I'm talking about many districts, one of the things I've done recently is actually coach staffs in Texas at a school district in the whole cell instruction. And what we did the final year wasn't our final year planned, but COVID made it the final year. We actually were training the administrators on adult self and how do you take care of yourself. And we were seeing the same things in Texas as I saw in California, that people are just overwhelmed by time, by performance objectives, that meeting the test requirements, et cetera, graduation, whatever. And it puts a great deal of stress on the educators of the whole system. And one of the things that we saw immediately is, who do you shortchange when you're short on time? And you shortchange yourself. One school in particular walked the walls on what are they doing that they always did. Some people put, I don't exercise anymore, I'm eating horribly, et cetera, et cetera. And then they buddied up according to their areas. And so people who weren't getting exercise said, okay, we're making a pact on Tuesday and Thursday. We're out of here at 3:30 and we're off to the gym. And we're going to do it together. So we forced each other. Another group said, we need to eat lunch together because I'm going to go run out to a fast food restaurant otherwise and bring garbage. So let's talk about good lunch habits. So we saw people starting to find ways to take care of themselves. Another challenge for the administrator, particularly the administrators of fairly large elementary schools, is it's really hard sometimes to focus on some of the wonderful things your people are doing, or in some cases, the person that struggles and you have a hard time making time to find something really good about that person. And I've seen it just turn around people immediately. Like, I didn't even know I thought I existed. I'm not the best teacher on staff. And, you know, I know that students don't care for me as much, but I am very strict. So finding ways to say, you know, I really appreciate how you handled that child yesterday. You were so accommodating, you listened to him, but you held firm on what you needed to tell him. I was very proud, and I certainly appreciate what you did, and I learned from you. So it's those kinds of things that you often forget. The same with a district level. I happen to work for an outstanding superintendent in Redondo Beach, and we had brought in a writing program that really asked teachers to risk a bit. And at the end of the year, we talked to the language specialist and asked them to tell us who really gave it their all, really tried hard. We wrote personal thank you notes to over 100 teachers, and the payback was years. And every time they saw us, oh, I still have that note. I appreciate you took the time to do that. So I have seen it work at all different levels, and you know, we're all the same. We are putting in all of everything we've got, and to have somebody say, well, I need more, you know, a parent demand or a test situation or behavior problems. So when someone takes a moment to say, thank you for what you did, I learned from you, I I felt so much better after I talked to you. I was having a bad day. So I've just seen the payoff, just incredible.
Lindsay, it sounds like building on what Sandy's saying, it seems like this is a way just to not just give feedback to educators when you do an observation or a walkthrough, but it can be an informal, very easy and regular way to do positive reinforcement to keep building on their strengths. In your own work and with professional development with teachers, does that kind of line up to you what I'm saying here? Is it a potential way to support that kind of approach?
Absolutely. We are always so grateful for educators' time, especially, taking out of their very busy day to attend any professional learning sessions that we are facilitating. And we're always so grateful for that. And I think, even just expressing that quick gratitude, Sandy, like you were saying, just stopping in the hallway, it can be very informal, or it can be very formal with those letters that you wrote. But that experience of being able to hear some of that positive feedback from your peers, anyone who is overseeing the work that you're doing, it has such a powerful impact on what we're doing in education.
And I remember the statistic about half of teachers leave within the first 5 years of being in the profession, and I still remember my first few years. And Sandy, something you're saying that Lindsay's getting me to go back to, that idea of like, oh, I didn't know someone knew I was here and doing this job or doing a good job. And that just that moment can be a lifeline to really make you feel like, oh, I am seen. And I feel like I'm pushing this rock up the hill every day, but like I'm making an effort. I'm being valued by folks I didn't even realize knew who I was as a colleague. And I'm not professing that this is going to solve retention, but I can imagine making people feel seen and connected will at least help support administrators as they seek to retain and support the emotional health of their teachers. Just how do you feel about that observation? Do you think so?
Mike, before we get too far, I do want to give us a 2-minute warning.
Oh, why, thank you. Well, Sandy, how about I let you finish, and then I'll quickly pivot to the last couple slides.
So I think I've sort of hit on this, what makes educators self-effective. I think it's that application, not just in the classroom with the kids, but modeling it throughout the day for your educational community, whether you're in the building or at the district level. I think when I was teaching at the college level too, I could see that stress all the time on the students, because now they were working on another credential, et cetera. And, I would just stop and say, if you need another few classes to complete this, that's fine. I know what you're going through. Just keep me posted and make sure you don't get far behind on this. But I recognize you've got a job during the day and it's very stressful. So just that little ease off on the higher ed part of the program. And again, I was trying to model how you would do that with your staff and your own children in your classroom too. So I just think that we've all hit on this about the well-being. I used to have a Caught You Being Good card when I was a principal. I'd ask teachers to hand out cards to kids who they caught doing good, and then they got so many, and we had lunch on the lawn together. And then I started doing it with teachers, and got expensive, but it paid off. I mean, they just loved to collect those and be sure they got a chance to spend a half hour with me at lunch somewhere off campus. So people just respond in amazing ways to just, hey, atta boy, atta girl, keep up the good work, and we're right behind you.
I do agree that integrating it into and having the educators do the very thing they have to lead with the students makes it so much more effective from a professional development side. I think that's a really good point. I love your framing of catching people being good, whether it's a colleague or whether it's a student, and gratitude is just a natural way to do that, to then reinforce that thing. I just think it's a beautiful way to talk about it. And unfortunately, we're out of time. I knew this would go by too quickly. I did want to just mention and frame for folks that GiveThx offers the program that we outlined to educators completely cost-free. There's a quick training and launch. It just takes minutes a week. It complements what you're already doing. You should look at some of those routines earlier. And it creates an immediate impact. It helps people feel seen and connected. Fort Sam Houston down there in Texas, Roland Rios was kind enough to share his perspective. And it really does take minutes a week to transform culture and make educators feel more connected and to address some of their well-being challenges. So I encourage you to take a peek at this. Again, cost-free, easy, lightweight, high impact way to help support a learning community. We're out of time. If there are questions, we encourage you to put them in the chat or to reach out to us. We will absolutely get back to you on them. As far as how you can learn more about the program, in case you are interested in bringing it to your staff, please reach out to me and I'll get you to the right person. We'd be delighted to support you for the rest of this school year or next school year. I just want to take a moment to thank both Sandy and Lindsay for participating in this very brief but exciting topic that's near and dear to my heart. And we encourage people to reach out with questions and do explore the resources, particularly those practices that you can take and use this afternoon if you wish. Lindsay, any closing comments?
No, I just wanted to express our gratitude, Mike, for you joining us today for this quick webinar. We love partnering with GiveThx and use it ourselves, and it has really transformed the way that we interact with each other and the way that we view our jobs at Greenfield Learning. So thank you all for attending today as well and taking time out of your busy schedules. As Mike said, if you have any additional questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. You can also reach out to Mike and he will connect you depending on what your needs are. He will connect you either with anyone on his team or on the Greenfield Learning team to help best support you and your educators. So thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day and rest of your week.